Let's talk about solving equations that have more than one variable for one of the variables. In this case, let's solve this equation for y. What you want to do is you want to think about it as if y was the only variable and this was a number, say 3 times 7, 3 times 40, doesn't matter what, just say this was a number. Well, in that case, you'd know how to solve the equation. You just use inverse operations, PEMDAS backwards, SADMEP, however you like to think about it. So the first step would be to subtract this number from both sides. Now, in this equation, it's not actually a number, it's 3 times the variable x, so these are not like terms, so we cannot combine this into one term. But all we did is subtract 3x from both sides. Now, we were going to divide both sides by 5, because that'll get y by itself. Notice dividing both sides, not just part of one of these sides, but both sides. So it's y equals 30 minus 3x all divided by 5. You can leave it like that, but you will sometimes see it written differently. Sometimes you'll see y equals 30 divided by 5 minus 3x over 5, which can just be written as 6 minus 3/5 times x. Some equations are formulas. You might recognize this as the formula for the area of a triangle. Area equals half times base times height. Let's say we want to solve this equation for b, the base of the triangle. Well, in that case, we want to think about b as if it was the only variable, and h and a were just numbers. Well, how do you undo multiplying by a half? You can multiply by 2. So multiply both sides of the equation by 2, and you get 2a equals b times h. Now, if you're trying to solve for b, it's b times some number. How would you get b by itself? You'd divide by that number. So divide both sides by h. B is by itself. You're done. You've solved this equation for b. This formula you might recognize as one way to write the Pythagorean theorem, which talks about the relationship between the three sides of a right triangle. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Let's say we want to solve that equation for a. Again, if a was the only variable and b and c were just numbers, then we would subtract this number from both sides. In this case, of course, c and b are not numbers, but unknowns or variables, so they're not like terms, so we cannot simplify that part any further. A is not by itself. We have the square. How do you undo squaring? You take the square root of both sides. So we take the square root of both sides. The right-hand side is just the square root of c squared minus b squared. And because squaring and square rooting undo each other, a is by itself. And since a is by itself, you're done. You've solved this equation for a.